Good morning. Bill Herp. After the last 24 hours, I've just been amazed at the range of ideas and the expansive quality of coming to something like this. And I have to tell you, I was pretty nervous last night thinking about how I was going to get up and be able to match up with what's going on here. And is it fading away? Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I was very encouraged this morning to hear Walt Mossberg and Clay Christensen describe their experience in high school math, because that's kind of how I feel over the course of the last few hours, is that, I used to think I was a smart guy, but boy, I really feel like a dummy here. But what I've tried to do is think a little bit about trying to keep it simple, because that seems to work well for me. And in the context of sharing some ideas about innovation, I've thought about three questions. What do I do? How did I get this way? And maybe what sort of lessons there might be to the rest of you folks that perhaps you could go apply. The best way for me to start talking about what I do is to talk about what I've done. And there's a picture of a jet up on the screen behind me, which is the disruptive technology that Bill talked about, and actually Clayton Christian has written about, that comes from Albuquerque, New Mexico, from Eclipse Aviation. That is a small private aircraft. In fact, here's another view of it. Seats 3 to 4 passengers, 2 pilots, has the potential to provide an alternative mode of transportation to people who would otherwise be thinking of flying on the airlines, in that it's about a third of the cost of the current smallest private business jet to buy, and about half the cost to operate. And the real major disruptive technological innovation is in the engines. So the engines are the result of about 20 years of industry and government research into how to scale down small turbine engines, and represent some pretty significant technological advances that allow us to get an airplane up in the air and use basically half the fuel that we would otherwise have to use. So, in looking at the implications, we see a large consumer growth segment that's roughly about $30 billion, and the opportunity to provide air travel in a personal mode that is about equivalent to flying on the airlines when you've got 2 or 3 people flying coach. And over the course of the last few years, myself and our team, we've built a base of about 12,000 people in our database who are interested in this in the Northeast. We've used a proxy aircraft, a turboprop aircraft, and have 6 of them operating in Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., and seasonally down in the Caribbean. We have about 1,000 customers, and we're now on the heel of the hockey stick, industry-wise, with these airplanes starting to be deployed into the world. And so this is my last slide, you'll be happy to know. I'm still going to talk a little bit, but I wanted to put this one up because it shows the team. And I think this is pretty important in terms of the things that I've done. I didn't just wake up one day and say, gee, I'm going to go start an airline and get into the VLJ air taxi business. It started with an interest that I had, an interest in aviation. I became a private pilot back in the mid-90s when I was between 2 of my companies back then. Because I was interested in aviation. I grew up in the 60s and the Apollo program and all that stuff, and at one point I had the time, and my wife gave me permission, and I went off and became a pilot, and so that was interesting. And then I discovered that I was actually pretty good at understanding how aviation works. A lot of people think of flying airplanes as being a complicated task, and it is, but my brain is kind of wired in a way that makes it simple and easy for me, and I can understand how it works. And was able to sort of convince myself with the feedback of the people around me that there was an opportunity to go out and latch on to this disruptive technology platform and create a disruptive business model that had the potential to become a fairly large enterprise. And I can tell you that when I first announced at the Thanksgiving dinner table in November of 2003 that I was going to start an airline, the silence was deafening. After the sound of the silverware hitting the floor, settled down. But luckily around me, I had a lot of other people who sort of said, hey, I think your talents match up against this, and there really is an opportunity here, and I think you should go for it. And so what took place after that was putting together a team of like-minded people, investors, partners, employees. As you can see, we now have about 100 people involved in the enterprise, from the 20 investors that we have to the 50 employees to the other folks who are surrounding us with support. And so we're well positioned, one of really 3 companies at this point who have the potential to dominate the early stages of this business. So that's one story. And then about what I do based upon what I've done. And the other story is the previous company. So it's a totally different space. It's actually a technology space in the marketing area. It's a company called eDialog that I started back in 1996 based upon my interest in the nascent form of communication called email. I'm sure you've all heard of email and the internet, which sort of was starting to develop back in the mid-90s. And I had a friend who was an author who got me onto AOL back in '94, I think. You know, at the time, you probably recall, if you were on AOL, you could talk to people on AOL. If you were on CompuServe, you could talk to people on CompuServe and so forth. But there was no interconnectivity yet until the internet changed all that. And so it started with an interest, and we started to build a business around that. And eDialog is now, to sort of fast forward, having gone through some ups and downs, about a 250-person company. And by the way, it's for sale, so if anybody has a 9-digit pile of cash lying around, talk to Broadview Jeffries. But another example of where I had some interest, some people around me encouraged it. It seemed to match up with my talents, and we built a team in order to make it happen. So how did I get this way? How did I get to the point where I was emboldened to discover my interests and focus on my talents and be able to step into environments where there are a lot of skepticism. Again, to start an airline these days is something that a lot of people think is sort of patently ridiculous. To start an email company that was focusing on helping large brands figure out how to responsibly communicate with their customers through this new medium. There was a lot of skepticism about how that was going to work and whether or not there would be room for new companies or whether or not that would just be simply something that advertising agencies would offer or database marketing companies would offer. And I sort of go all the way back to my early years, really as a teenager, in being encouraged to seek out my interests and understand how those interests related into talents. And by the way, they aren't always the same thing. I like house painting. I like painting. I like the result of painting a room and seeing the lines all match up. But it takes me a day to paint a room, and I would never be able to make a living at that rate. So that's not something that, as an interest, that really matches up with a talent that allows me to turn it into a business. Discovering those interests and being encouraged to take advantage of those interests, focus on my talents, and being sort of given the opportunity to understand that you can think big and that opportunities are available to you as an entrepreneur and as an individual, and then over the course of time understanding that the importance of team in all of this, finding other like-minded individuals to sort of help you keep things moving in the right direction is critically important. The lessons learned out of all this, I think, is in terms of things that I can take away, is to encourage certainly young people, and this is where I'll make a pitch for my nonprofit. I'm on the board of Junior Achievement of Eastern Massachusetts, which is, as many of you may know, is a nonprofit educational organization that helps support the educational system by providing extracurricular education into free enterprise and capitalism and entrepreneurship. And in fact, I was a student in the program back in the 70s, a very long time ago. And that helped to a large degree to expand my thinking about what was possible and where I could kind of move things forward. And then helping people focus on their talents. Clay Christensen's story about the child who had what was thought of as a learning disability, but through the teacher's perception of the child's ability to communicate through dance, I think is a telling story. Being able to focus on talent. So often these days, in performance reviews and in the grading system and in the educational system, we focus on how to try to fix people's weaknesses and try to make them better for the things that they're not good at. I've realized that you can get a lot more leverage out of focusing on what people are good at and focusing on their talents, and then giving them the ability to understand that in order to take advantage of opportunities that, that present themselves, particularly through the result of disruptive innovations, that it's important to have a team. It's not really possible to it's not really possible to work on that and get it done on your own. And in fact, I've learned some of those lessons the hard way. I've talked about linear air, I've talked about e-dialogue. There are some other things in my past that I prefer not to talk about because those were lessons learned in sort of a negative way, where you start something, A, it is an interest, but B, you don't have any talent at it. Or you've got interest and talent, but you don't have the ability to draw other people into it and help you support what you're doing going forward. Those are the sorts of lessons that I think that each of us could sort of take away with us and encourage people in our own organizations, focusing on their talents and rallying them around the team idea. And also, in terms of the potential educational and societal impact of helping young people in our families, in our communities, in our educational systems, focus on their interests, understand what their talents are, and understand the value of building teams in order to accomplish their objectives. So I think I probably have a few minutes left, but I'm going to go. I haven't seen a 10. I thought maybe I'd see a 10, which would tell me that I was doing great, and I haven't seen that, which makes me feel like. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Jack at this point. Thank you.